Hello everybody, and what I would like to do in this video is to go through a simple example of how to use JUnit5 testing to test a Java class in IntelliJ. So here we have a very simple class. It's a person class, takes in a person's full name when it's constructed, and it has one method which is getInitials, and that's based on their full name. So that's the class that we're going to use to demonstrate how to create JUnit5 testing. So in IntelliJ you can actually generate some things. You can also get the same thing from pressing Alt and Enter, and here we can have test. Now if I do this initially, what we get here first is we get no test routes found, and that's because I haven't actually defined a test source route. So I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to set that up. So here I'm going to create a new directory. I'm going to call it test, and then I'm going to mark the test as, that's right click on there, and then go down to the bottom here, mark test as a test source route. So you can see that if I was to go to the module settings, you can now see that actually in our module settings, project module, we actually see that test, and we can actually see the test source route. So there we can just confirm whether we've got a test source route. So now when I actually click generate and generate a test on this class, I can see that it actually is auto-leaving. And there's a couple of things that we can also set up for. So we can actually use click a setup, and we can even generate a test method for our initial one. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to go from first principles. So there. Now if it's not the JUnit5 found in the module, you can obviously fix that there, but there's also, it will come up later when we come to discover. So I'm going to add that to my get source, and here you can see that it's already asking there. So when you see the red line, that's because from there where the JUnit5 wasn't seeing. And here I'm going to let IntelliJ just add it to the class path, and I'm also going to allow it to actually also download the dependency from Amazon repository, so that I get the latest version of that. And so that's that done there. So now this is actually got a test. Now one of the first things you can do when opening a project is to test that your framework is actually working. And so here there's a very simple way that we do. So all tests start with test, the annotation test that lets the actual the test framework know that this is going to be a test. And here we're going to void test fail. So we create a method here, test fail. When you create a method name, always make sure that the name is very descriptive of what you're trying to do. So in this case, I'm trying to test that it fails, and here I will use a fail. There it automatically selects it and things. So that one imports the annotation, and this one is going to import the assertion from this package here. So when I actually run this, I can actually run this from one person test here. I can also run all tests here, and I can run individual tests from just actually clicking on here. So first of all, I'm going to run all the tests there. So it's going to build the person class, and then of course it actually fails the test because of course that's exactly what this actual method did. It says it will fail and test. So apart from testing the framework, the other place that you would use a fail is if you was to during testing get to a particular state where you're not expecting it to get in that state, and therefore you can then say, well, I've got into this state, fail, and then you can also add a message. So here I'm going to add the message, testing framework. And if we was to rerun the tests, and there you'll see, and this time I actually also get the message there. Right, so I no longer actually need that. I'm actually going to start with testing proper. So here the first thing we're going to do is test, and we're going to test actually the construction of the object to make sure that when we construct this object it's not null. So we're going to go void test person not at all, test person creation. So here we're going to use the assert. The first one that we're going to do is assert they actually are not null. So here I'm going to create a new person object. I'm then also going to use a name. So let's have ant. And if I was to also reuse names again, another common thing is also to create actually constant values for the strings. So I might also use a constant value. So might have name here, and then my thing is that. So private final static string name equals name. There's everything. So there is also one that I might actually also create here. There. So I'm going to just answer this out. You may also think that newly created objects is never null, and that is pretty much true. And if I run that, then I should expect that to just pass flying thing. But one of the things is it said on the thing was in the person class is that when we actually construct it, it said if the person's name is null, then we should actually throw a null pointer error. So in this case, our test then goes here. So what we want to do is we'll write out the actual what we want to test for the moment. So void test person with null name throws null pointer error. So again, we're using a very descriptive method name to tell us exactly what we expect this test. Now what we're now going to do is use a method called assert throws. And assert throws needs two things. The first thing that it needs is the method that it expects. So in this case it's going to be the null pointer exception, and we use the class here to actually say that we're expecting to get back a null pointer object, and that's what we're going to test against. One thing I just need to add here is a T. There we go. And then we're going to use a lambda expression to actually run a piece of code that we hopefully should generate that null pointer exception. So the code that we want to generate is that we want to generate thing. So the first thing I want to do is set up a null string. Here it's going to be null string. This is a bit redundant there, but I'm still going to paint because we're going to tell it out. And so if I now create a new person, which is a null person equals new person, and then we give it the null string. So IntelliJ is already actually warning us that the null string is always null. So it's warning us, but we're just putting it out this way to make it really explicit. That's what we're trying to do. So in this case, when we actually create this null person, we are expecting a null pointer error, because that is what the actual the documentation says that you should. That if a person's name is full name, if a person's full name is null, we throw a null pointer error. So that's what our expected behavior, and that's what we're testing here. So our expected behavior is what's gonna come back as null pointer, and we're using this lambda method to actually run this little piece of code to actually generate that one. So let's run all the tests. I'm going to just run all the tests here because it didn't run all the tests, and there we can see that the actual person did actually fail. And I could, with all messages, we can actually all add a a message to them. So all these assertions that we can actually also add a message ourselves. Did not throw a null pointer. So we can, with any of these, we can always throw that. If I just rerun that test, you can see did not throw the null pointer I expected there. So now we actually have to go and look at our class and explain why. So in this case, we have our full name and we're not doing any check. Now there's two ways that we can fix this code. The first one is an older way, which we can just do a check on thing. So if the full name is null, then we will throw the null pointer exception. And in fact, we can even add the thing, and it must be a new null pointer exception. And here I'm going to add the message, person's name must not be null. So let's run all those tests again. And there we can see that we've actually passed this test. Because in this time, when we actually do run the person's name, it is a null and it does things. So we've tested the creating of a person. So now let's actually go and work now on the first message, which is the initials. So here again, let's go for test. And always test the simplest case first. So in this case, the simplest first is we're going to test initial with one person name. So again, we're going to test what we expect. So we are expecting that we're going to create this new person. Okay, so I'm going to assign this to person, and actual person is equal to a new person, and we'll call it ant. Okay, and just to explain, explicitly write this out so that you can expect what we do. Our expected string is going to be equal to A. So that's the expected output that we expect. So now we're going to assert equals, because we want to test that our expected string, and the usual way that we do this is to put the expected string, and then our actual person dot get initials. So we're expecting, so when we got our actual person and we get the initials, we're expecting that to be the same as the expected string. And again, there's an equivalent one where we could add a message, and here we could add something like the expected string plus is not so we could actually also add the message, and just to make that a bit more clearer, let's just put that on the next line there. So that's our test there. So let's run all the tests now. And there you can see that we have failed. And the reason being is the expected A was not null. So we got back a null. I think we can actually also use this to show the expected difference. And that will go down into greater detail. So let's close that. So let's go back to the person class and see what's potentially going wrong. Well, the first thing is that we were just returning null. So in this case, let's change. So sometimes when you're doing testing, particularly if you're doing testing and development, always try and get the simplest solution that will actually just pass the test that you see it from. So the simplest solution in here is that if I actually take the full name and just take the letter of the first initial of the letter, actually get character at 0, that's right. Oh, and there's also one other thing that I also forgot to show you. There is an alternative way to actually do this. And so if we wasn't to do that, we can use this method called objects. Required non-null. And what this method is basically going to do, that if this requires non-null, if this is null, it will raise the null pointer error. Okay, and so I'm going to run both these tests. So I have actually changed the other test, so that should hopefully still pass, and also our new test pass. And there you can actually see our test do pass. So just to recap on that, so we refactored that one to make it even better, and we've also got this one which now passes that test. So that first test was just testing with just one name, which is fine, and if I was to choose another name, I would expect the outcome to work. So I'm going to copy them. I'm going to copy this test, and now I'm going to change this new test. First of all, so I'm going to test with two-person name. So let's have Ant Hall. Okay, so now we have a new Ant Hall. Our expected string in this case will be AH, and that is what we expected. We don't need to actually change this because it's still the same requirement. So now let's test to see whether that actually is also occurring. So let's run this to all the tests, and there we can see that we actually have failed that test because again we expected AH but our actual was L. If we actually also see the difference, we can see the clear difference there. So again we failed. So let's go back to our person and fix the person test. Now the reason of the person test is that we have this full name but we only got the first one. What we really want to do is get the letters of each of the first one. So one thing that I'm going to do first of all is actually create a new string. So first of all, let's create a string initial. Let's set that to the empty string. So we got our initials, and what we want to do first of all is also we want to create another one. I'm going to do this very verbose just so that it's very clear what I am doing. So we're going to create names, which is going to be equal to this name, full name, but then I'm going to split that according to the spaces. That will give me a string of an array of names, which I'm going to go there. And then I'm going to loop through that names. So for string name in names, and then I'm going to add that to the initials, and that's going to be the name dot character at 0. Yeah, that is a good thing there. It's suggesting it's a string builder, but for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to leave this as that. String builder would be a better way to build this up, and then when we finish we will return the initials. So just to go through that again, we are going to split the full name according to spaces, and then we are going to then get the first letter of each of those names and add it to our initials, and then return the initials. So again, if I was to then run all the tests, and they all pass, which is fine. I could even test that with 3 people's names, and I would probably expect this one to also pass. And Bob, hold, and my expected string would be then ABH, and then if I was to run that, I would expect that to run. That would be no problem. As we can see, there's no problem there. But now let's throw in a curveball. So we're gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna go with extra space. So basically the extra space is there. We're gonna have it after there. So I've got and Bob double space Hall. And I'm still expecting the initials to be that, because that would be a common exception, is that if you saw that name with the extra space you wouldn't expect anything different. That's what you think. So let's run that test, and here indeed we can see that we failed. Index out of bounds 0, so there's a going on here. So let's have a look at the person test and what's going on. Well, the main reason on the split on the on here is because when we split here, there's actually going to be 3 lots of strings, in the sense so that when we will actually get a string which will include ant, it was Bob, and then it will be this empty string here and followed by Hall. That's what the actual array will look like, and that's because of the double space there. It creates this empty string here. So there are a couple of ways to do this, but one way is we can just actually, before we add this, we can just do a simple check to check that the name is greater. So if name dot length is greater than 0, then we can add the initial string to that. Okay, and then if we run all those tests again, and now we can see that we've passed that test. So we can go further in testing, and then obviously there you could test far more complicated things, but that's the kind of initial idea on test. So we've actually really covered this. Now we can be fairly certain that when we're creating this name and getting the initials, we're fairly certain that we're getting the expected outcome. So hopefully that's helped everybody. I've put a link to the actual GitHub on this, so you can see the code in full, and I hope that's been instructive.